So for this video, I want to discuss what caused Jimmy McGill to transform into Saul Goodman. The first scene regarding the cause of this transformation I want to discuss takes place during season 1 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Pimento. In this scene between Jimmy and Chuck, we see all of Chuck's true emotions on the subject of his brother being a lawyer displayed, following Jimmy discovering that it was Chuck, not Howard, who did not want to hire him as a lawyer at HHM.
You're not a real lawyer.
I'm what?
You're not a real lawyer. University of American Samoa, for Christ's sake? An online course? What a joke. I worked my ass off to get where I am. And you take these shortcuts and you think suddenly you're my peer? You do what I do because you're funny and you can make people laugh? I committed my life to this. You don't slide into it like a cheap pair of slippers and then reap all the rewards.
I thought you were proud of me.
I was. When you straightened out and got a job in the mailroom, I was very proud.
So that's it then, right? Keep old Jimmy down in the mailroom because he's not good enough to be a lawyer.
I know you. I know what you were, what you are. People don't change. You're Slippin' Jimmy. And Slippin' Jimmy I can handle just fine, but Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun. The law is sacred. If you abuse that power, people get hurt. This is not a game. You have to know, on some level, I know you know I'm right. You know I'm right.
From Chuck's perspective, you can understand why Chuck despises the fact that his brother is a lawyer. Using hindsight, it appears that Chuck had the proper foresight in predicting what kind of lawyer Jimmy would end up becoming in Breaking Bad, a lawyer who ends up facilitating in the sale of methamphetamine among many other crimes. To some degree, it appears that Chuck was spot on in his assessment of Jimmy McGill during the scene in season 1 of Better Call Saul. On the other hand, the other side of the argument is that Chuck's tirade against Jimmy in this scene is what ultimately pushed Jimmy over the edge and caused him to become the unapologetically corrupt lawyer we saw in Breaking Bad. I have a bit of trouble accepting the latter argument at face value, primarily due to the fact that this argument places the majority of the blame for Saul Goodman's eventual actions in Breaking Bad at the feet of Chuck, which as a result diminishes Saul Goodman's personal responsibility for his own actions in Breaking Bad. It is hard for me to believe that none of Jimmy's actions prior to this outburst by Chuck would have led Chuck to believe that Jimmy would not continue to incrementally break the rule of law for his own advantage. For example, Jimmy attempted to defraud the Kettlemans and committed bribery as a lawyer among many other crimes before the shocking revelation that Chuck told Howard not to hire Jimmy at HHM. On the subject of Jimmy's eventual transformation into Saul Goodman, I think that there was a lot of latent repressed anger and resentment within Jimmy McGill over the course of his life that was the fuel for his transformation into the lawyer he would eventually become in Breaking Bad. I think that Jimmy McGill is similar to Walter White in this capacity. In a previous video where I discussed the psychology of Breaking Bad, we can see that in the case of Walter White, this displays the fact that all human beings with latent repressed anger and resentment who are also put in adverse and abnormal circumstances have the internal mechanisms instilled in them which are capable of causing them to commit heinous and reprehensible actions. In the same sense that the events in Walter White's past caused him to have dormant repressed anger and resentment prior to his adverse and abnormal circumstances, over the course of Better Call Saul, we saw glimpses into Jimmy's past that seemed to have caused him a great amount of anger and resentment as well. For example, this anger and resentment from Jimmy's past was displayed in season 2 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Inflatable during the flashback opening scene when Jimmy was very young and worked in his father's store. In this flashback scene, we see Jimmy's father getting conned by a customer at his store. We see that this event seemed to have a great impact on Jimmy even at a very early age. The fact that Jimmy saw his father as a pushover is one reason which likely caused Jimmy to have a lot of dormant anger and resentment over the course of his life. We also hear Jimmy discuss this experience working in his father's store during a flashback opening scene in season 3 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Slip when Jimmy talks about his father DeMarco. The dialogue in this scene does a great job to display the anger and resentment that Jimmy holds onto as a result of his father.
It's a crying shame they lost this place.
They never should have bought it in the first place. My dad didn't have it in him.
What do you mean? Your folks worked so hard.
Yeah, they worked hard. They worked a lot of hours for a lot of years. For nothing.
I don't know, Jimmy. You know, a lot of customers, everybody liked him.
Everybody liked him because he was a soft touch. You know? Every deadbeat in the neighborhood owed him money. You come in here with a sob story, you leave with a pat on the back and a gallon of milk. He could have made it work. He could have sold beer and cigarettes to the kids from Mary Margaret's, but oh no, not him. He's never going to do what he had to do.
We can really hear the anger and resentment towards his father being a pushover in Jimmy's voice when he tells the story to Marco, which has seemingly impacted Jimmy throughout the entire course of his life. So, with all of this being said, even if this outburst by Chuck in season 1 of Better Call Saul was not the sole reason which caused Jimmy to become a criminal lawyer, Chuck's subsequent actions over the course of season 2 and season 3 of Better Call Saul regarding his plan to get Jimmy disbarred certainly did cause Jimmy to be very angry and resentful towards Chuck. We see Jimmy's anger and resentment towards Chuck as a consequence of this event displayed in the episode entitled Off Brand in season 3 of Better Call Saul during a conversation Jimmy has with Chuck's ex-wife Rebecca.
If you feel misled, I apologize, but I think I was clear. I told you I had to defend myself and Chuck would need help afterwards, which he does.
You got what you wanted. Now it's time to do what's right.
Yeah. No.
Jimmy, he's still your brother.
Not anymore, he's not.
Even after the fallout of this failed plan to get Jimmy disbarred, Jimmy extends an olive branch to Chuck and tries to bury the hatchet with Chuck in the season finale of season 3 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Lantern, but Chuck ultimately rejects Jimmy's overture. In defense of Chuck, one can really understand the position that Chuck is coming from, being as honest and forthright of a person as he is in the aftermath of this plan to get Jimmy disbarred. Regarding Chuck's perception of Jimmy as a lawyer, my read of Chuck is that he believed that if you let these acts by Jimmy, which bend the rule of law, slide as just trivial misdeeds, then where does one eventually draw the arbitrary line of what laws are fine to break versus the laws that would be reprehensible and inexcusable if broken? As Chuck said himself, the law is sacred. So, with this being said, I believe the issue of Chuck causing Jimmy to turn into Saul Goodman is not as black and white as it seems. In addition to Jimmy being very angry and resentful towards Chuck in Better Call Saul, we also see that Chuck felt a lot of anger and resentment towards his brother Jimmy as well. For example, Chuck seemed to be very resentful of the fact that he could never make his ex-wife Rebecca laugh like Jimmy could. This was displayed in the flashback opening scene in season 2 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Rebecca. Additionally, Chuck's relationship with his mother also likely caused Chuck to be very resentful towards Jimmy. We saw this anger and resentment by Chuck towards Jimmy displayed in a flashback scene in season 2 of Better Call Saul in the opening scene in the episode entitled Click. All of Chuck's anger and resentment towards Jimmy appears to stem from the fact that Chuck cannot understand what people see in Jimmy that is so remarkable and why people like Jimmy and are attracted to him as much as they are. We see all this anger and resentment by Chuck towards Jimmy displayed in full force in season 3 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Chicanery.
You think this is bad? This chicanery? He's done worse. That's billboard. Are you telling me that a man just happens to fall like that? No, he orchestrated it. Jimmy. He defecated through a sunroof. And I saved him. And I shouldn't have. I took him into my own firm. What was I thinking? He'll never change. He'll never change. Ever since he was 9. Always the same. Couldn't keep his hands out of the cash drawer. But not our Jimmy. Couldn't be precious Jimmy. Stealing them blind. And he gets to be a lawyer? What a sick joke. I should have stopped him when I had the chance. And you have to stop him.
This outburst by Chuck epitomizes all of the anger and resentment he has towards Jimmy. Chuck could not comprehend why his family, including his ex-wife and his mother, were both seemingly fonder of Jimmy, who was a con man and a criminal in the eyes of Chuck. This made Chuck apparently just as resentful at Jimmy as Jimmy was at Chuck. So, with all this being said, this relationship between Jimmy and Chuck appears to be very deep and intricate, as it appears that while Jimmy is now resentful at Chuck at this point in his life, Chuck was apparently just as resentful towards Jimmy for most of his life. In the end, with all this being said, I think that there were a multitude of factors throughout the entire course of Jimmy McGill's life that caused him to become a criminal lawyer, which we saw over the course of Breaking Bad. As a result, I myself cannot lay all of the onus squarely at the feet of Chuck and say that this outburst by Chuck, along with his actions which attempted to get Jimmy disbarred, ended up being what ultimately caused Jimmy to break from the last vestige of morality, which then caused him to become a criminal lawyer. In addition to this, it's hard to say that Jimmy's resentment and anger towards his brother is justified, and therefore all of Jimmy's subsequent actions can be blamed on Chuck, but at the same time not justify all the anger and resentment that Chuck felt towards Jimmy. Furthermore, we currently do not have the entire picture of this period of time before we first see Saul Goodman in season 2 of Breaking Bad. There are currently about 5 or 6 years in the timeline of Better Call Saul from the season finale of season 3 and the first time we see Saul Goodman in season 2 of Breaking Bad. There are most certainly going to be many more events moving forward in season 4 of Better Call Saul which are going to have a great impact on Jimmy, which will push him closer towards becoming the Saul Goodman character we see in Breaking Bad. Primarily, Jimmy's reaction to the fallout of Chuck's apparent death, as well as the consequences consequences of the end of his relationship with Kim will certainly play a large role in his transformation into Saul Goodman. At the end of the day, while Chuck may have caused Jimmy to become even more angry and resentful in life, this outburst and subsequent actions by Chuck towards Jimmy was by no means the only cause of all of Jimmy's anger and resentment, which ended up being the foundation for his transformation into Saul Goodman. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Thank you to all the people who are watching my videos and who have subscribed to my channel. I really appreciate it. If you're a fan of Better Call Saul who likes to hear the sound of my voice talk about the show and are looking forward to season 4, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any videos. My name is Anton Jackson. Thanks again for watching.